The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, and the gentle clink of expensive silverware. Soft jazz played in the background as waiters in crisp black uniforms weaved between tables, and then the door opened. Marcus Carter stood in the entrance, his wife Sophia beside him, their 2 children, 10-year-old Elijah and 7-year-old Zoe, dressed in their finest clothes. The family had spent an hour getting ready for this dinner, a celebration of Marcus's recent promotion. The maître d' looked up, his smile faltering for just a moment before recovering. "Good evening," he said, his tone slightly cooler than it had been for the previous guests. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Marcus replied confidently. "Carter, party of 4, 7:30. The maître d' scanned his list, finger moving down the page with deliberate slowness. He frowned. "I'm sorry, I don't see your name here." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Could you check again? I made the reservation 2 weeks ago and received a confirmation email." The restaurant was clearly not full. Several empty tables with reserved signs were visible from where they stood. The maître d' shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. Nothing under Carter." Sophia stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Perhaps there was a mistake. We'd be happy to wait for a table to become available." "I'm afraid that won't be possible." A new voice cut in. The restaurant manager approached, a tall man with thinning hair and a pinched expression. His name tag read, "Richard Simmons, General Manager." "All of our tables are reserved for the entire evening," Richard stated, not bothering to check any list. "Perhaps you might try the casual dining place down the street. They don't require reservations." Elijah tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, I'm hungry," he whispered. Marcus kept his expression neutral, years of practice masking the familiar burn of indignation. "Mr. Simmons, I have a confirmation email from your restaurant. We've been planning this dinner for weeks." Richard's eyes never quite met Marcus's. "Without a reservation in our system, there's nothing I can do. Perhaps you misunderstood the email." A white couple entered behind them. The maître d' immediately brightened. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, welcome back. Your table is ready." The Petersons were escorted past several empty tables with reserved signs. Sophia's back stiffened. She reached for her phone. "I can show you the confirmation email right now." "Ma'am, I don't need to see your email. Our system is accurate." Richard's tone was dismissive. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other guests to attend to." He turned to walk away. "Mr. Simmons," Marcus called, his voice level but carrying. Several nearby diners looked up from their meals. "Is there a reason why those empty tables can't accommodate my family?" Richard turned back, irritation flashing across his face. "Those tables are reserved." "For whom?" "For our patrons." "And we're not potential patrons." Richard's jaw tightened. "Look, I'm trying to be polite here. This is an exclusive establishment with certain standards. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about the type of dining experience we offer." A waiter nearby froze, a bottle of wine in hand, clearly uncomfortable with what he was hearing. "What standards exactly?" Marcus asked, his tone deceptively soft. "The ability to appreciate fine dining, the capacity to afford your menu prices, or perhaps something else." Richard glanced at a security guard standing by the bar. "Sir, if you continue to make a scene, I'll have to ask you to leave." Little Zoe looked up at her mother, confusion in her eyes. "Mommy, why can't we eat here?" Sophia bent down, whispering something in Zoe's ear that made the little girl nod, though her eyes remained questioning. Marcus looked around the restaurant. Several diners were now openly watching. Some looked embarrassed, others curious. A few even seemed to be nodding in approval of the manager's actions. "Mr. Simmons," Marcus said quietly, "I'd like to speak with the owner." Richard laughed, a short, dismissive sound. The owner isn't available, and even if he were, he wouldn't interrupt his evening for this misunderstanding. Marcus reached inside his jacket pocket. That's interesting. What's interesting? Richard asked, impatience clear in his voice. It's interesting that you think you know what the owner would or wouldn't do. Marcus pulled out a business card and handed it to Richard. The manager took it automatically, glancing down at it with disinterest that quickly transformed into confusion. I don't understand, Richard said, his voice suddenly less certain. It's quite simple, Marcus replied. My name is Marcus Carter. My wife Sophia and I purchased this building 6 months ago through our investment company, Carter Holdings. We own this property, including the restaurant space your establishment leases. The color drained from Richard's face. We've been meaning to visit, to experience the restaurant as regular customers before introducing ourselves to the management team. Marcus's voice remained calm, but his eyes were sharp. I thought it would give us a more authentic experience. Richard's mouth opened and closed, no words emerging. And I must say the experience has been enlightening. The maitre d' had gone rigid, his eyes wide with shock. Now, Marcus continued, I believe you said something about standards. I'd be very interested to hear more about these standards. The entire front of the restaurant had fallen silent. Even the jazz seemed to have paused at just the right moment. Richard swallowed hard. Mr. Carter, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Yes, Marcus cut in, there has been. But I don't think it's the misunderstanding you're suggesting. Sophia stepped forward. My husband and I have a meeting scheduled with the property management company next week. I believe we'll have quite a lot to discuss regarding the renewal terms of your lease. A middle-aged woman at a nearby table set down her wine glass with deliberate care. Excuse me, she said, her voice carrying in the silence. I'd like to pay my bill now. I suddenly find I've lost my appetite. Her dining companion nodded in agreement, already reaching for his wallet. At another table, a young couple exchanged glances before standing up, leaving their barely touched appetizers behind. Dad, Elijah said, his young voice clear in the uncomfortable silence. Can we go somewhere else? I don't think I want to eat here anymore. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Yes, son, there are plenty of restaurants that would be happy to serve us. He looked directly at Richard. Restaurants with better standards. He turned to leave, his family beside him, dignity intact. Mr. Carter, please, Richard called after them, panic edging into his voice. If you'll just give me a chance to explain. Marcus paused at the door. You'll have that chance, Mr. Simmons. At our meeting next week, I suggest you prepare your explanation carefully. As the Carter family walked out, several more diners requested their checks. Outside, in the cool evening air, Zoe looked up at her father. Daddy, why didn't they want us to eat there? Marcus knelt down to his daughter's level, meeting her eyes. Sometimes, sweetheart, people make judgments based on what they see on the outside, without knowing who someone truly is. That's not fair, Zoe declared with the simple clarity of a child. No, it's not, Sophia agreed. But what's important is how we respond. We stand tall, we speak truth, and we never, ever let anyone make us feel less than who we are. Marcus stood, taking his daughter's hand. And sometimes, he added with the hint of a smile, justice has a way of finding its own path. Little did Richard Simmons know, the path of justice was already forming, its course clear and unavoidable, its destination a reckoning that would reshape not just one restaurant, but an entire community's understanding of power, dignity, and consequences. The story of what happened that Friday night would soon spread far beyond those restaurant walls. And it was only just beginning. Marcus Carter sat in his home office Sunday evening, scrolling through his email. Since Friday night, his inbox had been flooded with messages, all about the incident at Le Bistrot Elegant. He opened one from an unfamiliar address. Mr. Carter, I was dining at Le Bistrot Elegant on Friday night and witnessed how you and your family were treated. I'm a reporter for the City Herald, and I believe this story deserves to be told. Would you be willing to speak with me? Respectfully, Alicia Washington III. More similar emails followed. News traveled fast in this digital age. Sophia entered carrying 2 mugs of tea. She set one beside Marcus's laptop. More messages? He nodded. Reporters, witnesses from the restaurant, even the regional director of the restaurant group. And? Sophia asked, settling into the armchair across from his desk. The regional director wants to meet immediately, tomorrow morning if possible. Marcus took a sip of tea. He's practically begging. And the others? I haven't responded yet. Sophia studied her husband's face. After 15 years of marriage, she knew the thoughtful crease between his brows well. What are you thinking? Marcus leaned back in his chair. I'm thinking about Elijah and Zoe, about the questions they asked on the drive home. Why the man didn't want us to eat there, Sophia recalled. Why some people don't like us before they know us. Exactly. Marcus's fingers tapped lightly on his desk. I've spent my entire career building businesses, creating opportunities, working within the system to effect change. And you've been extraordinarily successful, Sophia reminded him. Indeed, Marcus Carter's journey from a scholarship student to one of the city's most successful black entrepreneurs was well documented. Carter Holdings now owned commercial properties throughout the metropolitan area, with investments in technology startups, renewable energy, and community development projects. Yes, but what does that success mean if my children still have to face the same prejudices I did? If they're still judged by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character? Sophia reached across the desk to take his hand. That's why we keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for them. For all the children who deserve better. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. He turned back to his computer. I think it's time we used our position to shine a light on this. His fingers moved across the keyboard, drafting a response to Alicia Washington. He would speak with her, but on his terms. This wouldn't be a story about one restaurant's discrimination. It would be a larger conversation about systemic bias and the responsibility of businesses to create inclusive environments. What about the regional director? Sophia asked. Oh, I'll meet with him, Marcus confirmed, but not before I have a conversation with our property management company and legal team. He opened another email, this one from Taylor Martinez, a waiter at Le Bistrot Elegant. Mr. Carter, I was working Friday night and witnessed how Manager Simmons treated your family. This isn't the first time I've seen this behavior, but most people don't have the power to do anything about it. I have documentation of other incidents and would be willing to share them with you. I risk my job by sending this, but some things are more important than a paycheck. Sincerely, Taylor Martinez. Marcus forwarded the email to his legal team with a note. Please reach out to Mr. Martinez. Ensure he understands his legal protections as a whistleblower. The doorbell rang downstairs. Sophia glanced at her watch. That must be James and Michelle. James Reynolds had been Marcus's roommate in college and was now his chief financial officer. Michelle, his wife, was Sophia's closest friend and a civil rights attorney. They were coming for dinner, a long-standing Sunday tradition. I'll be down in a minute, Marcus promised. After Sophia left, Marcus opened one final email from Richard Simmons himself. Mr. Carter, I want to sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding on Friday night. Had I known who you were, I would have ensured you received our very best table and service. I hope we can put this unfortunate incident behind us and develop a positive landlord-tenant relationship moving forward. Regards, Richard Simmons, General Manager, Le Bistrot Elegant. Marcus read the message twice, noting what wasn't said as much as what was. Simmons wasn't sorry for discriminating. He was sorry for discriminating against someone with power. Had I known who you were, Marcus murmured to himself. That was precisely the problem. He closed his laptop without responding. Some messages deserved no reply. Downstairs he found James and Michelle already seated in the living room, Elijah showing them his science fair project, while Zoe practiced a dance routine she'd created. "There he is," James called, rising to embrace his old friend, "the man who's setting the local restaurant scene on fire." "You heard?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't surprised. "Are you kidding? Michelle got 3 calls about it yesterday, and I've been fielding texts since Saturday morning." James lowered his voice. "Is it true the manager actually suggested you go to the casual place down the street?" "Oh, it's true," Sophia confirmed, entering with a tray of appetizers. He might as well have said, "Go to where your kind belongs," for how subtle he was being. Michelle shook her head, her attorney's mind already cataloging the legal implications. "Classic case of public accommodation discrimination. You have grounds for a significant lawsuit if you wanted to pursue it." "We're considering our options," Marcus replied, "but this isn't just about us. It's about a pattern of behavior that affects people who don't have the resources or platform to fight back." "Daddy?" Zoe had stopped dancing and was now standing beside him, her small face serious. "Are you going to make that man lose his job?" The adults exchanged glances. "Leave it to a child to cut straight to the human consequences." Marcus lifted his daughter onto his lap. "What do you think should happen, Zoe?" She considered the question with the gravity only a 7-year-old could muster. "I think he should have to say sorry. A real sorry, not a fake one. And he should learn why what he did was wrong. Out of the mouths of babes." "That's very wise," Marcus told her. "Sometimes the most important consequence isn't losing something, but gaining understanding." James raised an eyebrow. "So you're not planning to evict the restaurant?" "I didn't say that," Marcus replied. "Actions have consequences, but Zoe's right. There needs to be education, not just punishment." Michelle leaned forward. "I have some thoughts on that front. The civil rights organization I work with has developed an excellent corporate training program on unconscious bias and inclusive customer service." "Send me the details," Marcus said. "It might become a new requirement for all our commercial tenants." As they moved to the dining room for dinner, the conversation shifted to strategies and possibilities. By the time dessert was served, the outline of a plan had emerged, one that would address not just Friday's incident but the underlying issues it represented. Little did Richard Simmons know, as he frantically called his regional supervisor that same evening, that the consequences of his actions would extend far beyond one family, one restaurant, or even one property. The ripples were already spreading, touching lives he'd never met and institutions he'd never considered. And it had all started with a simple denial of service to the wrong family, or perhaps, from the perspective of justice, exactly the right one. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched Richard Simmons' mood perfectly. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying Friday night's disaster on an endless loop. He straightened his tie in the restaurant's bathroom mirror, rehearsing his explanation for the 5th time. The regional director would arrive in 20 minutes for an emergency meeting. "It was a simple misunderstanding," he muttered to his reflection. "Their name wasn't in the system. We were fully booked. I was following protocol." Even to his own ears, the excuses sounded hollow. The truth was uglier, and Richard knew it. He'd taken one look at the Carter family and made assumptions. Black family probably couldn't afford the prices, might make the regular clientele uncomfortable. He'd seen Marcus's impeccable suit, but hadn't registered the quality. Had noticed Sophia's jewelry, but assumed it was costume. And now he might lose everything because of it. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa Chen, the regional director. Just parked, coming in now. Richard swallowed hard and left the bathroom. In the main dining room, the morning staff was setting up for lunch service, pretending not to notice his obvious distress. Lisa entered, her expression unreadable. She was a formidable woman in her 50s who had worked her way up from waitress to regional director of operations for Exclusive Dining Group, which owned Le Bistrot Elegant and 5 other upscale restaurants in the city. "Richard," she said with a curt nod, "let's use your office." Once the door closed behind them, her professional mask dropped. "Do you have any idea the damage you've done?" she demanded. "Marcus Carter isn't just our landlord. He's one of the most respected business leaders in this city. He sits on the boards of 3 major corporations and the Community Foundation. His wife chairs the Arts Council." Richard's stomach churned. "I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," Lisa cut in. "You didn't know, so you assumed. And your assumptions have put this restaurant and potentially our entire restaurant group at risk." She pulled out her tablet and showed him an email. "This came directly from Carter Holdings this morning. They're reviewing our lease for potential violations of the non-discrimination clause." Richard paled. "Can they break our lease over this?" "Legally, possibly. The clause is quite specific about maintaining business practices that align with equal opportunity principles." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "But that might be the least of our concerns. The social media backlash has already started." She pulled up Twitter, where the hashtag Le Discriminant was trending locally. Pictures of the restaurant with captions describing Friday's incident were being shared hundreds of times. "Mr. Reynolds, our CEO, has called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon." Lisa's voice was clipped. "In the meantime, I need to understand exactly what happened." For the next 20 minutes, Richard recounted the interaction, trying to frame it in the best possible light. But with each detail, Lisa's expression grew darker. "You suggested they go to the casual place down the street," she repeated incredulously. "And you said something about standards." Richard winced. It wasn't meant to sound. It doesn't matter how it was meant to sound. It matters how it was received. Lisa rubbed her temples. "And I've received reports from staff that this isn't the first time you've turned away minority customers using the reservation system excuse." Richard's defensiveness flared. "That's not true. Who said that?" "Multiple employees, Richard. And given what happened Friday, I'm inclined to believe them." A knock at the door interrupted them. The maître d' from Friday night, Kevin, poked his head in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here from the City Herald asking to speak with management. She says she's writing a story about Friday night." Lisa stood immediately. "I'll handle this. Richard, stay here." As the door closed behind her, Richard sank into his chair. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Just saw something online about the restaurant." "What's going on?" He couldn't even bring himself to respond. 15 minutes later, Lisa returned, her expression grim. "The reporter has already spoken with the Carters and 3 customers who witnessed the incident. She wanted our comment." Lisa's tone made it clear she wasn't pleased with the situation. "I provided a standard statement about investigating the matter and our commitment to inclusive service." "What happens now?" Richard asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now? Now we wait to see how bad the damage is." Lisa gathered her things. The board will make decisions this afternoon. Until then, you're suspended with pay. Suspended? But the lunch service? I've asked the manager from our downtown location to cover temporarily. She paused at the door. Richard, I've known you for 8 years. You're an excellent operational manager. Your food costs are impeccable. Your staff turnover is low, and your wine program is award-winning. He waited for the but none of that matters if you can't serve all customers with equal respect. This industry is about hospitality, making people feel welcome. What happened Friday night was the opposite of our mission. After Lisa left, Richard sat alone in his office, the walls seemingly closing in around him. Everything he'd worked for was in jeopardy because of a split-second judgment, an unconscious bias he'd never fully acknowledged. And the worst part? He still wasn't sure he would have acted differently if he could do it over again. Not unless he'd known who Marcus Carter really was. That realization terrified him more than losing his job. While Richard Simmons contemplated his uncertain future, Marcus Carter was walking into the downtown offices of Westfield Property Management, the company that handled day-to-day operations for Carter Holdings real estate investments. The receptionist greeted him warmly. Good morning, Mr. Carter. Ms. Patel is expecting you. Nisha Patel, a sharp-minded woman in her early 40s, was already standing when Marcus entered her office. I've pulled the lease agreement for Le Bistrot Elegant, she said without preamble, gesturing to the document on her desk. Section 12.4 specifically addresses non-discrimination practices. Marcus settled into a chair. And based on what you've described, they're in clear violation. Nisha sat down, folding her hands. We have grounds to issue a formal notice of breach, which would give them 30 days to remedy the situation or face termination of the lease. What would remedying the situation look like in this case? That's somewhat open to interpretation, Nisha admitted. At minimum, disciplinary action against the manager involved, a formal apology, and implementation of non-discrimination policies and training. Marcus nodded, considering. I spoke with our attorney this morning. She suggested we might have grounds for a civil rights complaint as well. You absolutely do, Nisha confirmed, but that would be separate from the lease violation issue. What happens to the restaurant's employees if we terminate the lease? The question seemed to surprise Nisha slightly. They would likely lose their jobs, unless another restaurant took over the space quickly and chose to retain them. Marcus leaned back in his chair. How many employees does Le Bistrot Elegant have? Nisha consulted her tablet. 27 full-time and about 15 part-time, according to their last report. So we're talking about potentially 42 livelihoods. Yes, Nisha acknowledged, though I should point out that's not typically a consideration in lease violation cases. Perhaps it should be, Marcus said quietly. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. The building that housed Le Bistrot Elegant was just visible in the distance, its distinctive copper roof gleaming despite the overcast day. I received an email from a waiter at the restaurant, Marcus said. He claims the manager has a pattern of discriminatory behavior. He's offered to provide documentation. That strengthens your position considerably, Nisha noted. It does. Marcus turned back to face her. But it also suggests the problem goes beyond one man. It's about a culture that allows such behavior to continue unchecked. Nisha waited, sensing he was working through his thoughts. I don't want to simply punish, Marcus finally said. I want to transform, not just this restaurant, but our entire commercial portfolio. He returned to his seat and outlined his idea. A new inclusion rider for all Carter Holdings leases. Commercial tenants would be required to implement bias training, establish clear non-discrimination policies, and undergo periodic compliance reviews. It's ambitious, Nisha said when he finished. Some tenants might push back. Let them, Marcus replied. Those who can't commit to basic human dignity aren't tenants we want. Nisha made notes on her tablet. What about Le Bistrot Elegant specifically? Issue the notice of breach, Marcus decided, but instead of giving them 30 days to remedy or face eviction, offer them an alternative. Participate in our new inclusion program as the pilot tenant. And if they refuse, then they'll have made their choice. Marcus's voice was firm but not vindictive. But I suspect their corporate leadership is smart enough to recognize both the ethical and business arguments for accepting our offer. As the meeting concluded and Marcus prepared to leave, Nisha asked one final question. May I ask why you're taking this approach? Many landlords would simply evict and find a new tenant, especially given the prime location. Marcus paused at the door. My daughter asked if I was going to make that man lose his job. She thought he should have to give a real sorry, not a fake one, and learn why what he did was wrong. Nisha smiled. Wise child. Yes, Marcus agreed. And I want her to see that justice doesn't have to be destructive to be effective, that we can use our position to create change, not just punishment. After Marcus left, Nisha began drafting the breach notice and outlining the new inclusion rider. In her 20 years of property management, she'd never seen a landlord take such an approach. But then again, most landlords hadn't experienced what the Carters had on Friday night. Most landlords didn't have to explain to their children why some doors remained closed to them despite all their parents' achievements. Across town, Sophia Carter was having lunch with Michelle Reynolds at a small cafe near the courthouse, where Michelle had just finished a morning hearing. I filed the complaint this morning, Michelle said, stirring her iced tea. The Civil Rights Commission will investigate. Sophia nodded. Marcus and I discussed it. We want this on record, even if we don't pursue damages. Speaking of Marcus, how is he doing with all this? Really doing, I mean, Sophia sighed. You know Marcus, he processes everything internally before he shows it. But I know it hit him hard. Not for himself, but for the kids. Michelle nodded in understanding. James was furious when I told him. Said it brought back every time he was followed in a store or pulled over for driving while black. That's the thing, Sophia said, her voice quiet but intense. No matter how successful we become, no matter what we achieve, there are still people who see only our skin color and make judgments based on that alone. She looked down at her hands, the diamond on her wedding ring catching the light. Do you know what Elijah asked me yesterday? He asked if it would have been different if he and Marcus had been alone, without Zoe and me. If two black males would have faced even worse treatment. Michelle's expression tightened. What did you tell him? The truth. That, unfortunately, yes, it might have been worse. Sophia looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. He's 10 years old, Michelle. 10. And he's already having to navigate these realities. Michelle reached across the table to squeeze her friend's hand. Which is why what you and Marcus are doing is so important. Using your position to create systemic change. I hope it makes a difference. It will, Michelle assured her. The complaint alone sends a message, and when it's coupled with whatever Marcus is planning for the lease. Sophia's phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it and gave a small, satisfied nod. Marcus just left the property management office. They're issuing a breach notice today, along with the alternative compliance program. And the reporter's story? Running tomorrow, Sophia confirmed. Front page of the business section. Michelle raised her glass in a small toast. Let's hope Richard Simmons enjoys reading the morning paper. The board meeting of Exclusive Dining Group convened at 3 p.m., in a sleek conference room overlooking the city. 8 people sat around the polished mahogany table, expressions grim. CEO Jeffrey Reynolds called the meeting to order. I assume everyone has been briefed on the situation at Le Bistrot Elegant. Nods all around. Lisa, please update us on your meeting with the manager this morning. Lisa Chen straightened in her chair. Richard Simmons admits to denying service to the Carter family on Friday night, though he frames it as a misunderstanding about reservations. However, multiple staff members have since come forward alleging a pattern of similar behavior toward minority customers. Christ, muttered the CFO. And these are the landlords? Yes, Lisa confirmed. Carter Holdings purchased the building 6 months ago. Marcus Carter is the founder and CEO. What's our exposure here? Asked Diane Wong, the company's legal counsel. Significant, Lisa replied. The Carters have filed a complaint with the Civil Rights Commission. We've also been informed that a story will run in tomorrow's City Herald. The social media situation is already problematic, added Martin Alvarez, their marketing director. We've seen a 40% increase in negative mentions since yesterday morning. Several influencers with large followings have picked up the story. The CFO leaned forward. What about the lease? Can they evict us? Technically, yes, Lisa said. The lease has a non-discrimination clause that we're likely in violation of. A heavy silence fell over the room. Le Bistrot Elegant is our flagship location, Jeffrey finally said. It represents 20% of our annual revenue. Losing it would be challenging. It's not just about one location, Diane pointed out. This kind of publicity affects all our restaurants. We're already seeing cancellations at our downtown venue. Jeffrey turned to Lisa. What's your recommendation regarding Simmons? She didn't hesitate. Termination. His actions violated our stated policies and exposed the company to significant liability. Moreover, the reports from other staff suggest this wasn't an isolated incident. I concur, Diane said. Keeping him sends the wrong message, both legally and ethically. Any dissenting opinions? Jeffrey looked around the table. There were none. Very well, Lisa, please handle the termination process. He sighed heavily. Now, regarding the broader issue. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for a response, which was unprecedented. I'm sorry to interrupt, but this just arrived by courier. It's marked urgent. She handed Jeffrey a large envelope. He opened it and scanned the contents, his expression growing increasingly concerned. It's a notice of breach from Carter Holdings, citing violation of the non-discrimination clause in our lease. He continued reading. However, they're offering an alternative to eviction. What kind of alternative? The CFO asked. Participation in something called the Commercial Tenant Inclusion Initiative. It would require implementation of bias training for all staff, establishment of clear non-discrimination policies, and regular compliance reviews. He passed the document to Diane, who read it carefully. It's actually quite reasonable, she said, sounding slightly surprised. They're not seeking monetary damages, just systematic changes. Can we negotiate? Martin asked. Diane shook her head. The letter is quite clear. This is the alternative to lease termination. It's not a starting point for negotiation. It's also a potential PR opportunity, Martin pointed out. If we embrace this publicly, it could help mitigate the current damage. The CFO frowned. What about costs? This training and compliance are insignificant compared to the cost of losing our flagship location and the associated reputation damage, Jeffrey cut in. His decision was clearly made. We accept their terms, terminate Simmons, and use this as an opportunity to reinforce our commitment to inclusive service. He looked around the table. I want a public statement drafted immediately. Lisa, please reach out to Carter Holdings and inform them of our decision. Diane, review the Inclusion Initiative requirements and begin implementation planning. As the meeting adjourned, Lisa lingered, collecting her notes. Jeffrey approached her. You've worked with Simmons for years, he said quietly. Did you ever notice this behavior? Lisa considered the question carefully. I never witnessed anything explicitly discriminatory, she admitted, but there were patterns in the customer demographics at his location. Fewer minorities than our other restaurants, despite the neighborhood composition. And we missed it, Jeffrey said, more statement than question. We all did, Lisa acknowledged, which perhaps proves the need for exactly the kind of initiative the Carters are proposing. The following morning, the city awoke to the headline in the business section of the City Herald. Local business leader denied service at upscale restaurant. He owns the article, written by Alicia Washington, detailed Friday night's incident and its aftermath. It included quotes from Marcus Carter, witnesses who had been dining at the restaurant, and a statement from Exclusive Dining Group announcing the termination of Richard Simmons and their participation in the new Commercial Tenant Inclusion Initiative. By noon, the story had been picked up by national outlets. Richard Simmons sat at his kitchen table staring at the newspaper. His phone had been ringing all morning, friends, colleagues, even a few reporters. He'd answered none of the calls. His wife placed a cup of coffee in front of him. I told you months ago that your intuition about who belongs in that restaurant would get you in trouble someday, she said quietly. Richard looked up, expecting to see accusation in her eyes, but found only sadness. I didn't think. That's just it, Richard. You did think. You thought they didn't belong. And you acted on that thought without hesitation. She sat across from him. Now you need to ask yourself why. He had no answer. Across town, Marcus Carter was in a meeting with his executive team when his assistant knocked on the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Chen from Exclusive Dining Group is on the line. She says it's urgent. Marcus excused himself and took the call in his private office. Mr. Carter, Lisa began, her tone professional but warmer than he expected. I wanted to inform you personally that our board has accepted the terms of your inclusion initiative. We're grateful for the opportunity to address these issues constructively rather than facing lease termination. I appreciate that, Ms. Chen. I also want to extend our deepest apologies for the treatment you and your family experienced. It was inexcusable. And Mr. Simmons, Marcus asked, has been terminated, effective immediately. Marcus absorbed this information. I see. We're preparing a public statement. Is there anything specific you'd like us to include? Marcus considered the question. Yes, please mention that this initiative isn't just about one incident or one restaurant. It's about creating systematic change across the entire commercial real estate sector. After ending the call, Marcus remained at his desk, reflecting on the rapid developments. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Just saw the article. Phones are ringing off the hook at the foundation. Everyone wants a statement. He texted back, Richard Simmons has been fired. Restaurant group accepted the inclusion initiative. Her response came quickly. Good first step. Dinner at 7. I'll be home by 6:30, he promised. At Le Bistrot Elegant, the lunch service was unusually quiet. News had spread quickly, and many regular customers had chosen to dine elsewhere. Those who did come seemed uncomfortable, stealing glances at the staff and speaking in hushed tones. Taylor Martinez, the waiter who had emailed Marcus, was serving a table of business executives when one of them recognized his name from the newspaper article. You're the whistleblower, the woman said, her voice carrying. Taylor froze momentarily. I prefer to think of myself as someone who spoke up for what's right. The woman nodded approvingly. It takes courage. Not everyone would risk their job like that. Some things are more important than a paycheck, Taylor replied, echoing the words from his email to Marcus. As he walked back to the kitchen, he noticed several other staff members watching him, some with admiration, others with uncertainty. The interim manager, a woman named Rebecca Thompson from the downtown location, called him aside. "I just got off the phone with Ms. Chen," she said. "She'd like you to be part of the implementation team for the new inclusion initiative." Taylor looked surprised. "Me? You demonstrated integrity, Taylor. That's exactly what we need moving forward." She handed him a card. "Call this number tomorrow. They're setting up the first planning meeting." The card bore the Carter Holdings logo. By evening, the story had evolved. What had started as an account of discrimination had become a conversation about corporate responsibility and systemic change. Social media buzzed with discussions about the Commercial Tenant Inclusion Initiative, with other business leaders expressing interest in implementing similar programs. At 6:25 p.m., Marcus Carter pulled into his driveway. True to his word, he was home before 6:30. Inside, he found Elijah helping Zoe with her homework at the dining room table while Sophia prepared dinner. "Daddy!" Zoe jumped up to greet him. "Ms. Jackson showed the newspaper article to our whole class today. She said you're creating systematic change, whatever that means." Marcus lifted his daughter into a hug. "It means trying to fix problems at their roots, not just their branches." Elijah looked up from his textbook. "Did they fire that manager, Dad?" Marcus set Zoe down and nodded. "Yes, they did." "Good," Elijah said firmly. "He deserved it." Sophia gave Marcus a meaningful look over their son's head. They had talked about the importance of teaching their children that justice wasn't about punishment, but about restoration and growth. Marcus pulled out a chair and sat beside Elijah. He did face consequences for his actions, which is important, but firing one person doesn't solve the bigger problem. Elijah frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "Well, think about it this way," Marcus said. "If a tree in our yard is dropping branches on our roof, what's better, constantly picking up fallen branches or pruning the tree properly so branches don't fall?" "Pruning the tree," Elijah answered immediately. "Exactly. The manager's behavior was like a fallen branch, a symptom of a bigger problem. We need to address the root causes of discrimination, not just punish individual actions." Elijah considered this. "So what happens now?" "Now," Marcus said, "the restaurant group will implement new training and policies to ensure everyone is treated with respect, regardless of how they look." "Will it work?" Zoe asked, climbing back into her chair. Marcus exchanged glances with Sophia. "It's a start," he said honestly. "Change takes time. But by using our position to insist on these changes, we're helping create a world where, hopefully, you won't have to face the same discrimination we did." Later that night, after the children were in bed, Marcus and Sophia sat on their back porch, glasses of wine in hand. "Quite a few days," Sophia remarked. Marcus nodded. "And it's just beginning. Nisha called this afternoon. 3 other property management companies have reached out, interested in implementing similar inclusion requirements for their commercial tenants." "The power of example," Sophia said with satisfaction. "One stone creating many ripples." "The reporter, Alicia Washington, wants to do a follow-up piece on the initiative," Marcus added. "I'm thinking we should agree. Keep the conversation going." Sophia took a sip of wine. "You know this won't be the last time, right? No matter how successful we are, no matter how many buildings we own, there will always be people who see our skin first and nothing else." "I know," Marcus acknowledged. "But each time it happens and we respond not just with anger, but with constructive action, We chip away at the system that allows it to continue. For the children, Sophia said softly. For everyone's children, Marcus amended. The night was quiet around them, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere in that cityscape was a restaurant that had denied them service, never imagining the changes that single act of discrimination would set in motion. 1 month later, Taylor Martinez stood before 20 restaurant managers from across the exclusive dining group. As the newly appointed inclusion coordinator, he was conducting the first training session required under the Commercial Tenant Inclusion Initiative. Bias isn't always conscious, he explained. Often it operates below the level of awareness, influencing decisions we don't even realize we're making. He clicked to the next slide, which showed an image of the Carter family dressed in their Friday night best. This is the Carter family, successful business owners, community leaders, philanthropists. But on that Friday night, what did Richard Simmons see? The room was uncomfortably quiet. He didn't see Marcus Carter, CEO of Carter Holdings. He didn't see Sophia Carter, chair of the Arts Council. He didn't see their accomplishments or contributions. Taylor's voice was steady, not accusatory, but matter-of-fact. He saw their skin color and made assumptions based on that alone. A hand went up in the back. But how do we prevent that? If these biases are unconscious, how do we stop them from affecting our actions? Excellent question, Taylor replied. The first step is awareness, recognizing that we all have biases. The second is creating systems that help us check those biases before they become actions. He clicked to a new slide showing a simple flowchart for seating decisions. This is our new protocol for handling walk-ins and reservations. Notice that it removes subjective judgment from the equation. The same standards apply to everyone, regardless of appearance. The training continued for 2 hours, covering various scenarios and strategies. By the end, many of the managers were actively engaged, asking questions and offering insights from their own experiences. Lisa Chen, who had been observing from the back of the room, approached Taylor as the session concluded. "Well done," she said, "especially for your first time conducting the training." "Thanks," Taylor replied. "I think it went okay, but this is just the beginning. Real change takes time." "Speaking of time," Lisa said, checking her watch, "we should head over to Le Bistrot Elegant. The Carters are scheduled to visit for dinner at 7 p.m. Taylor nodded, gathering his materials. "Is everyone ready?" "As ready as they'll ever be," Lisa responded. "Rebecca has been preparing the staff all week." At Le Bistrot Elegant, the atmosphere was noticeably tense as 7 p.m. approached. Staff members straightened table linens and polished already gleaming silverware. Rebecca Thompson, who had been confirmed as the new permanent manager, checked and rechecked the reservation list. "They're here," the host announced, spotting the Carter family approaching the entrance. Rebecca took a deep breath and walked to the door, opening it before they reached the handle. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, welcome to Le Bistrot Elegant," she greeted them warmly. "We're honored to have you dining with us this evening." Marcus nodded, his expression neutral. "Thank you for having us." The family was escorted to the best table in the house, the one with a view of both the city skyline and the elegant interior. Staff moved with practiced efficiency, providing menus, filling water glasses, explaining specials. Other diners recognized the Carters. Their faces had been in the news for weeks as the inclusion initiative gained national attention. Some nodded respectfully. Others seemed curious about how the evening would unfold. As they settled in, Elijah looked around. "It's nice inside," he admitted, "but I still don't understand why that man didn't want us to eat here before." Rebecca, who was within earshot, paused. She looked at Marcus and Sophia, silently asking permission to respond. Sophia nodded slightly. Rebecca knelt to Elijah's level. "That was a mistake. she said simply. A terrible mistake that we're working very hard to make sure never happens again. Everyone is welcome here, and we're grateful you've given us a second chance to show you that. Elijah studied her face. Are you the new manager? I am, Rebecca confirmed. And you won't turn people away because of how they look? Never, she promised. Every guest deserves the same respect and excellent service. Elijah seemed satisfied with this answer and turned his attention to the children's menu. The dinner proceeded smoothly. The food was exceptional, the service attentive without being obsequious. About halfway through the meal, Lisa Chen and Taylor Martinez arrived, stopping briefly at the Carter's table to introduce themselves properly. Mr. Martinez, Marcus acknowledged. Thank you for your email that night. It took courage. Taylor nodded. Sometimes standing up for what's right is its own reward, but I never imagined it would lead to this opportunity. He gestured to his new position badge, which read, Inclusion Coordinator. How is the initiative progressing? Sophia asked Lisa. Better than expected, Lisa replied. We've completed the first round of training for all managers, and staff training begins next week. We're also seeing interest from other restaurant groups. And the new hiring practices? Marcus inquired. Implemented across all 6 locations, Lisa confirmed. We've already seen an increase in diversity among new hires. As Lisa and Taylor moved on to greet other guests, Zoe tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, is this our restaurant now? Sophia smiled. Not exactly, sweetheart. We own the building, but the restaurant rents the space from us. Oh, Zoe considered this. So we're like their landlords, like Mrs. Wilson who owns our beach house? That's right, Marcus confirmed. Cool. Zoe returned to her chocolate mousse, apparently satisfied with her new understanding of commercial real estate. After dinner, as the family prepared to leave, Rebecca approached with a small gift bag. A small token of our appreciation, she explained, and a symbol of our commitment to the changes we're making. Inside the bag were 4 handcrafted keychains, each bearing the restaurant's logo alongside the words, All are welcome here. Marcus accepted the gift with grace. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Dinner was excellent. We hope you'll return, Rebecca said sincerely. We will, Sophia assured her, though perhaps next time we'll come unannounced, just like any other family. Rebecca smiled. You'll receive exactly the same welcome, I promise. Outside, as they walked to their car, Elijah looked up at his father. Do you think they really changed, Dad? Or are they just being nice because they know who we are now? It was the question at the heart of the matter, one that Marcus had asked himself repeatedly over the past month. I think, he said carefully, that real change happens in stages. First, people change their behavior because they have to. Then, with time and education, they begin to change their thinking. And then their hearts, Elijah suggested. Marcus smiled at his son's insight. Yes, eventually their hearts. But that's the longest journey. How will we know if they've really changed? Zoe asked. Sophia answered this one. We probably won't know for sure, but by creating systems that require fair treatment of everyone, we make it more likely that change will happen, even if it starts with just following rules. As they drove home, Marcus reflected on the evening. The restaurant staff had been impeccable. The food outstanding, the ambiance perfect. Everything a high-end dining experience should be. But the true test wasn't how they treated the Carters now that they knew who they were. The true test would be how they treated the next family who walked through those doors, the family whose name they didn't recognize, whose face didn't appear in newspaper articles, who had no power to affect their lease or their livelihood. That was the change that mattered. And while tonight couldn't answer that question, the systems now being put in place made the right answer more likely. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete, but it was progress. And progress, Marcus had learned long ago, was often made in small steps rather than giant leaps, each step building on the last, creating a path toward the world they wanted their children to inherit. A world where a family could walk into any restaurant and be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character and the limit on their credit card. 6 months later, the Carter family attended a community foundation gala at the Grand Hotel Ballroom. As major donors, they had a prominent table near the stage. During the cocktail hour, Marcus was approached by a man he didn't immediately recognize. "Mr. Carter," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm not sure if you remember me. James Peterson. My wife and I were dining at Le Bistrot Elegant the night you and your family were denied service." Marcus shook his hand. "I do remember. You were seated just as we were being told there were no tables available." James nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Yes, I wanted to apologize." "For what?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "For not speaking up," James replied. "My wife and I saw what was happening. We knew it was wrong, but we said nothing." Marcus studied the man. "That's a common response, unfortunately. Bystanders often remain silent." "It shouldn't be common," James insisted. "After you left, we paid our bill and walked out too. But that wasn't enough. I should have said something in the moment." "Why didn't you?" Marcus asked, not accusingly, but with genuine interest. James considered the question. "Fear, I suppose. Not physical fear, but social discomfort. Not wanting to create a scene." He shook his head. "It sounds pathetic now." "Not pathetic," Marcus corrected. "Human, but awareness is the first step toward change." "Your inclusion initiative," James said. "It's making a difference. I'm on the board of Riverfront Development Corporation. We've implemented a similar program for all our commercial tenants." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "That's good to hear." "My company has as well," James continued, "but beyond the corporate policies, your story made me personally reflect on times I've witnessed discrimination and remained silent. I've promised myself I won't make that mistake again." As James walked away, Sophia joined Marcus, handing him a glass of champagne. "What was that about?" she asked. Marcus explained the conversation. "Interesting timing," Sophia remarked. "I just heard from Michelle that the Civil Rights Commission completed their investigation. They found substantial evidence supporting our complaint and are recommending Exclusive Dining Group maintain their inclusion program for at least 5 years. They've been surprisingly proactive," Marcus noted. "Lisa Chen sent me their quarterly diversity report last week. They've increased minority hiring by 22% across all locations. And Le Bistrot Elegant specifically. 40%, Marcus said with satisfaction. Rebecca Thompson has been quite the champion for change. The lights dimmed, signaling guests to take their seats for dinner. As the Carters made their way to their table, Marcus noticed a familiar face serving at one of the bars. Richard Simmons. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Richard's face flushed with recognition and something like shame. He looked away quickly, focusing intently on pouring a glass of wine. Sophia had seen it too. "Is that—" "Yes," Marcus confirmed quietly. "How does that make you feel?" she asked as they reached their table. Marcus considered the question. "Justified," he said finally, "but not triumphant. There's no victory in seeing someone humbled. The victory is in the changes his actions inadvertently sparked." Across the ballroom, Elijah and Zoe were chatting with the children of other donors. They moved confidently through the predominantly white crowd, unbothered by being among the few children of color present. They belonged here, and they knew it. That confidence, Marcus reflected, was both a gift and a burden. A gift because it allowed them to navigate spaces that might otherwise be intimidating. A burden because it wouldn't protect them from every Richard Simmons they would encounter in their lives. But perhaps, just perhaps, there would be fewer Richard Simmonses in their future, and those who remained would find themselves in a world increasingly unwilling to tolerate their behavior. As the foundation director took the stage to begin the program, he announced that the evening's fundraising had already exceeded their goal. The final item on the agenda was the presentation of the annual Community Impact Award. This year's recipient, he announced, has created a program that is transforming how businesses approach inclusion and equity. Through the Commercial Tenant Inclusion Initiative, they've established a model that is being adopted across the country, creating systematic change in how commercial spaces serve diverse populations. Marcus exchanged a surprised glance with Sophia. They hadn't been informed about this. Please join me in congratulating this year's recipient of the Community Impact Award, Carter Holdings. The spotlight found their table as applause filled the room. Marcus rose, straightening his tie as he made his way to the stage. As he accepted the Crystal Award, he glanced out at the audience. His family watched with pride. James Peterson nodded respectfully, and at the back of the room, Richard Simmons stood very still, a serving tray in his hands, watching the man he had once turned away, now being honored by the city's elite. Marcus stepped to the microphone. Thank you for this recognition, though it was never our goal. 6 months ago, my family experienced something that unfortunately remains all too common for people of color, regardless of their achievements or position. We were judged by our appearance rather than our character. He paused, making eye contact with various audience members. We had options that night. We could have responded with justified anger. We could have pursued significant financial damages. We could have simply evicted the restaurant and walked away. Another pause. Instead, we chose to use our position to create change that extends beyond one restaurant or one incident, because discrimination isn't just about individual acts of bias. It's about systems that allow those biases to affect how people are treated. He held up the award. This recognition belongs not just to Carter Holdings, but to every business that has joined the initiative, every manager implementing new training protocols, every staff member learning to recognize and counter their unconscious biases, and especially to those who have long faced discrimination without the power or platform to address it. Marcus looked directly at his children. The measure of our success won't be awards or recognition. It will be the day when families like mine can walk into any establishment and be greeted with the same respect afforded to anyone else. When judgments are based on character, not color. When inclusion is the norm, not the exception. He returned to his seat amid standing applause. As the gala concluded and guests began to depart, Richard Simmons approached their table. He looked nervous but determined. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," he began, his voice barely audible above the room's chatter. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I've spent these months reflecting on my actions and their consequences." The Carter family regarded him silently. "I lost everything," Richard continued. "My career, my reputation, my sense of who I was. But in that loss, I've been forced to confront truths about myself I never would have otherwise." "And what truths are those, Mr. Simmons?" Sophia asked, her tone neutral. "That I carried biases I didn't even recognize," he admitted. "That I judged people based on appearances and made assumptions that had no basis in reality. That I used my position to exclude rather than welcome." He looked directly at Elijah and Zoe. "I'm sorry for how I treated your family. There's no excuse for my behavior." The children looked to their parents, uncertain how to respond. "Thank you for your apology, Mr. Simmons," Marcus said formally. "I hope your reflections lead to meaningful change in your life." Richard nodded, understanding he was being dismissed. As he turned to leave, Zoe's voice stopped him. "Mr. Simmons," he turned back. "Did you learn why what you did was wrong?" she asked, echoing her words from months ago. "A real why, not a fake one?" Richard knelt to her level, his eyes welling with unexpected tears. "Yes," he said simply, "I did." Zoe nodded solemnly. "Good, that's important." As Richard walked away, Elijah looked at his father. "Do you think he really changed, Dad?" Marcus put an arm around his son's shoulders. "I think he's beginning to. Real change is a journey, not a destination." Outside, as they waited for their car, the night air was cool and clear. Stars shone above the city lights, distant but constant. Sophia slipped her hand into Marcus's. "Quite the evening." "Indeed," he agreed, "though I wasn't expecting the award." "You deserved it," she assured him. "What you've built goes beyond one incident. It's creating lasting change." Marcus looked down at his children, now yawning despite their attempts to appear grown-up and sophisticated. "For them," he said quietly. "For everyone," Sophia corrected, echoing his words from months earlier. Their car arrived gleaming under the hotel's entrance lights. As they settled inside, Marcus caught a glimpse of Richard Simmons waiting at the employee exit, shoulders hunched against the evening chill. A small circle completed, a lesson delivered. Not through vengeance or destruction, but through the patient, persistent power of justice properly applied. Systems could change. People could change. Not overnight, not completely, but incrementally, meaningfully. And sometimes, all it took to start that change was the right family being denied service at exactly the right restaurant. What would you have done in Marcus Carter's position? Would you have sought punishment or, like the Carters, focused on creating lasting change? Discrimination continues to affect people of color, regardless of their achievements or status. But when those with power use their position not just for personal retribution, but for systematic improvement, real progress becomes possible. Remember, justice isn't always about what happens to those who do wrong. Sometimes it's about what changes because of their actions. It's about turning moments of discrimination into opportunities for education and growth. If you've witnessed discrimination, whether as a target or a bystander, remember that your response can help shape not just individual consequences, but lasting change. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of justice served through wisdom rather than vengeance. And share your own experiences in the comments below. Together we can create a world where families like the Carters are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.